Got it.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, we're originally going to be trying to have our Insedios weekly. And so there's been a little bit of more than a week since the last one, but it's because one of our friends or actually a couple of our friends are in Germany, and so we've finally been able to coordinate so that we can have an Insedio session. And so I'm Isabella Reza, and with For the Greater Good.
I'm Blanca, Corpus Christi resident.
Elida, Castillo, Chispa, Texas. Go.
Oh, sorry. And Chloe Torres with Texas Campaign for the Environment.
All right.
We're going to say Guten Tag.
Good morning over there.
Good morning.
Can you guys tell us why you're in Germany? I think that's super important for the community to know.
Yeah, Hannah.
You want me to start? Okay, sure. Yeah, so it is really incredible to think how growing up, when you grow up in Corpus Christi, you kind of have the sense that you're a less important city than Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, all the big cities. But really, like, geopolitically, Corpus Christi is on the forefront of the climate crisis, but also the climate justice movement. So the work that we are doing here is causing waves over the Atlantic, all the way in Germany. They are hearing us all the way in Germany, and are really wanting to know like what our struggles are, and also to learn from the organizing and the activism we've been able to accomplish despite a distinctly repressive state and a completely negligent, unresponsive government, at least to people, right? Whereas they're very, very responsive to the needs and desires of corporations. So it's really about, connecting with people from across the globe who, not just from Germany, not just from Europe, but from Latin America as well. India, we've seen people from India, we've seen people from Russia, we've seen people from Africa. So many different communities are represented here at this camp. And so it also serves as like a commitment to each other that we are going to take what we learn from here and learn from each other and take it back to our respective communities and keep fighting.
Yeah, and it all centers around LNG, which is what they like to call liquefied natural gas, but we all know is fracked methane gas. And, the Port of Corpus Christi goes and seeks all of these contracts with, foreign governments. And then Cheniere LNG is the one who actually exports the product. And, especially after the war in Ukraine, we've just been hearing from Cheniere of how it's important for them to increase exports, and the port is always celebrating how much tons of LNG it's exported, and the crude oil. And so it's all about like, how is our community affected by this at the end of the day? Yeah.
I'm looking right now. I'm sorry. I'm listening. I'm looking right now that you brought that point up. It reminded me that I just read last week that Cheniere, and I'm going to pull that up real quick. Cheniere adds China to their roster. And of course, this article is kind of implying that it's just been added, which is not correct. That's where it's been going. But just to give you an example, it just says here, as Cheniere Energy gears up for expansion, which they're planning to do in our backyards, the company announced last week that its wholly owned subsidiary, Cheniere Marketing LLC, has entered into a long-term liquefied natural gas sale and purchase agreement with a subsidiary of PetroChina Company Limited. So PetroChina, that doesn't sound like what the port was peddling.
Yeah.
that doesn't sound like European allies.
So no, what did they tell us? What did Jeff Pollock say? That we had to increase our exports because we had to save our European friends from freezing in the winter. And if we didn't export LNG to Europe, we would have the deaths of Europeans on our conscience or on our minds or whatever. Like,
and
on
I
our
remember
hands.
that narrative in the Cheniere meeting when the port Stoogie came in and she told us the same thing, that it was, you know, they kind of pitched it as patriotic and like it's our problem, like we have to export this to help them, and it really is not true where they're exporting it.
So, and so,
It's just when the money is
Yeah.
when it's money, it doesn't matter. Loyalty is about countries, and it's
that's so interesting, because I was just, when you were saying that, I was just thinking, like, in sociology, the sociology of media, they talk about this as a mobilizing frame, that when they'll create a narrative that, like, the news gets reported in a way that makes it feel like the problem that exists is our problem, and then that we have to be part of the solution. And so, like, news media isn't neutral. They can be mobilizing or demobilizing, helping
yeah.
move in a certain direction, or actually trying to keep people from, like, developing a collective sense of identity and a shared investment in something that's happening.
Yeah.
I had a question.
that's
Is
exactly what they're doing.
That's so gross, because, like, patriotism is one of those things, right? Conflict and then these kind of threats. And but also it's like, oh, whose lives really matter?
Well, and you know, even if you were looking from a patriotic standpoint, I didn't know that it was patriotic to prop up and supply for China. I thought they were like really mad last weekend when Nancy Pelosi was flying around Taiwan. That's what I thought, but yeah. So even that narrative didn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't fit here.
The logic doesn't fit
No.
if you actually pay attention to the way that the news is constructed.
Yeah.
Okay, but I had a real basic question, because Cheniere is on the other side of the bridge, in San Patricio County, right?
Right.
Is that big flame that has been going on for, like, the
Yes.
past,
Yes.
like,
The ISR on?
It is, and I have a picture here. This is taken from my parents' backyard. And this, you know, it becomes a very personal thing when you have parents. This is from my parents' backyard. Can y'all see it?
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I can't. Will you do it? Because
Okay,
I
yeah.
like want to go the opposite of where yours.
I have no, I'm like zoom in. This is our high technology. Look
Yeah.
at video.
It's not the sunrise. Okay. And,
Yeah.
you know, for people like, well, like us that grew up here, and my parents that have lived there for 30 years, the biggest thing in the sky was always the sunrise. And now it's never nighttime there. The flare is that way, formaldehyde, benzene. And the saddest part of all is that flare right there in that same vicinity is an elementary school, a assisted living facility and I'm not talking like down the road. I'm talking like there, fence line, a school, a daycare, assisted living facility, neighborhoods. It's really,
So that flare we can see all the way from across the bay
yeah.
is the Cheniere flare, which is LNG, which is why you guys are in Germany.
And there, I guess, yeah, they're fighting the importing of it.
We're fighting importing of it, because actually here in Germany and a few other European countries, fracking is banned because they know how badly it messes up the environment and it messes up the ground and the groundwater. So it's banned here. So then they rely on communities like ours, you know, Texas, like our politicians selling us out like every day, and then exploiting communities in the global south, like in Colombia, Argentina, Chile, you know, places in Africa. Like they're exploiting it because they're saying, well, LNG isn't transitional fuel. And remember, like, we had a meeting with Barbara Canales, and she said, well, we need to export LNG to India because coal is bad, wood is bad. We need to give them LNG so that we can help the climate. And it really is, at the end of the day, like, who is willing to pay more? And because LNG, like natural gas, was so cheap, and they couldn't find any buyers or uses for it, so they were spending, you know, they were wasting a lot of gas, like, you know, these producers. So then they came up with LNG as a way to export it, and this narrative of like, it's a transitional fuel.
It's not cheap. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't want to lose my thought. I said, now it's for us, it's not cheap anymore. You go buy propane, you pay your natural gas bill, and it's not cheap anymore. It's cheap for them and their deals, but
Yeah.
we pay.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Because like our grid, our Texas grid is still highly dependent on gas.
Mhm.
And so when they're like exporting more, then we're competing with all of these rich countries. And so when you don't have enough product now in your own supply, what are you going to do? Sell it for a premium? And, you know, in Texas, like we don't have, it's not like, oh, whatever we use for the communities first, and then whatever's left over is what we can sell. That's not the way. And I mean, that's the way it is with us, like right now with our water situation, right?
And electricity and water, you name it. Yeah. It's like the countries for sale. Our country for sale.
Yeah.
And you're right, our area even more so.
Yeah. We got a big old garage sale sticker on us.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding what's happening with you guys over there. So there's a protest or is it just like a convening?
It's like a week-long camp.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's some panels going on. As we had mentioned, like there were speakers from all over. You know, so if you hear clapping in the background, because there's one going on in a big tent.
Mhm.
And, you know, we've heard from some of our neighbors in Latin America and Mexico, you know, and they're all just talking about like the struggles in their own country. So what we think is like, man, like this has to be like a lot, you know, and there's no way other places could be going through this. It's the same story.
Yeah.
Sadly.
But where the LNG is coming from tends to be countries that are predominantly they're not European countries.
Yeah, that's correct.
Us and developing countries pretty much that are being exploited. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah.
Well, we're starting to look like a developing country around here. I mean, it's sad, but it's true.
It's
Yeah.
really
The developing countries had car washes at every corner.
I know our water infrastructure is completely crumbling, and not just here. People in San Pat need to face that reality as well. I believe they're dealing with the same thing, and I think all these restrictions are actually going to exacerbate that. And yeah, you do start to put the pieces together, and I'm kind of glad that we're going that way, because I wanted to like you to talk a little bit about the funding for these, because like I was just saying earlier, I read that for this LNG exporting plan to go through, there's $100 billion of cost estimated for import and export terminals. And their plan is to put that on our backs, And I'm not really sure about European. The article I read said that it was going to be feasible through the American tax system and through the just leniency of regulations. That's basically their game plan. So that translates into us back taxpayers and let's just pollute. Who cares if they blow up like they did in Freeport, So, but I don't really feel that comfortable talking about the Chapter 313 funding and how they pull these scams off, Elida, but maybe you could tell us a little more.
Yeah, I mean, you've done a lot of research.
I guess how it ties into and comes right back down to our little world, to Gregory Portland ISD. I'm a Gregory Portland ISD Wildcat, by the way. So let's learn this about Gregory Portland ISD that we didn't know.
Yeah. So currently, Cheniere. So there was it's been a few, I think, like decades that there was some industries that were, or just some businesses that were going to build in Texas, but they found better tax abatements or tax subsidies in another state. So then Texas politicians at that time felt like, oh man, we can't lose out on this. So let's create this, system for businesses who may consider building elsewhere. We'll give them tax abatements and subsidies, and we'll give them all this money so that they can build here in Texas. But the situation like with Cheniere and, other fossil fuel industries is they're not going anywhere else. they can't find like politicians who are going to say, no, we want you in our communities, and
I believe
yeah, like y'all are amazing.
real quick, I believe I read somewhere that they said that's like coaxing industry here is like coaxing the Pope to Rome. There's water, there's, you didn't have to do that, Texas. Like,
Yeah, there wasn't a whole bunch that needed to be done to sway them to the area. And
Mhm.
it's so accessible, and like they were already all along the Texas coast, so naturally next place was Corpus Christi. And when you have an entity like the Port of Corpus Christi, who's just making it easier by buying up all this land and taking it off the tax rolls, and then they go and lease it to these industries. So when they're
they're just
taking
coming right
millions of
down the
acres,
coast. Yeah.
yeah, right
Well,
down the coast.
And
And
another thing,
unfortunately,
go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, unfortunately, because of all this activity, like we are now becoming the next like we're, some areas, especially like in Hillcrest and all that, there are little spots of Cantor Alley, and now like that's just going to the entire coastal Bend area.
I would say that stretch behind my parents' backyard too is getting there too. That stretch between Ingleside on the bay and Portland, it's getting
Yeah.
that where I mean I really.
Yeah, so going back to the 313s, Cheniere has received billions of dollars in subsidies and abatements. And so what they do is they go to the school district and they'll say, we're only going to pay this much for 10 years because this is going to be our worth, but we're going to give you all this money, as an advance. And so schools take it, so then they could go and they right now I think GP is building like a state-of-the-art athletic center, and so they'll say like we're going to give you all this money, and it sounds good, and then the state of Texas,
the state match it too or something.
Well, whatever doesn't get paid, the state of Texas says
so that's
that
us,
we're gonna that's us, then making up that difference. And for school districts like Gregory Portland, which is more affluent school district, so they pay into the Robin Hood system, and then so when there's less money going into that, then the poor districts kind of get and as we know, like Texas doesn't adequately fund public education right now anyway, so it's making a bad problem worse.
Like how much of this really was to bring economic growth and development when they're already here and they're applying for it again. So why are they applying again if they're already here? And the incentive on that thing was to bring them here in the first place, and they're here poisoning people over there in Portland.
Yeah, like you already got your welfare.
So that kind of is a really good example of how financially they're funding these things, and then the regulations that they're slashing, we have a pretty good example of that too, don't we? With Cheniere. You want to talk about that, or?
And I mean, it's not even like a story where it's like, oh, that's the rare occasion, that doesn't happen as often. I mean, recently Point Isabel, like in Port Isabel, denied a potential LNG facility tax subsidies and abatements there.
Congratulations, RGV, congratulations, we're very happy.
All of the work being done around that, all the organizers who did that, to stop it, and thank you to those school board members who didn't buy the lie.
I was looking at their pictures. I was like, oh, that's what they look like, because I had never seen one, a politician that listens to the people. I didn't know what that looked like. So that was really
Unfortunately, as we saw, like, during the Cheniere public meeting that they held on June 30th, I mean, police so it wasn't like the perfect situation, because some of the people that we know got taken out like by police officers, from the meeting they got, so it wasn't like the perfect thing, but the decision was something that we can applaud them for. There still needs to be a lot of work done in how they communicate with the community, and just being able to have the community voice their concerns. Like the public meeting, how many officers did they have there? They had like several Portland police officers present.
And one of the things that really bothered me was before the meeting, I got there really early because my dad was there early.
Can I time out real quick?
Yeah.
So for those of us who haven't been following this, can you just give a quick recap about what the meeting was about? And then just a little bit of background so that people can have context for
Sure.
what you're gonna share.
So the meeting was basically, just like we said, regulations, them wanting to get amendments to their permit to pollute more, which they had already been doing, right? And fill me in if I'm missing anything, girls. But
Yeah.
basically
Mhm.
just be allowed to emit more than what their permit allows. And of note is during this meeting, while we were having this meeting where it was a public show or whatever, Cheniere had already gone around us to the EPA and applied or asked for basically a blank check to get this one of a kind exemption from any kind. Basically, they just said, we can't do it right. So let's just, can you look the other way, EPA, basically? I mean, that's
Mhm.
how I
Right.
see it. And so this meeting was a sham, but we have to be there and we have to go because otherwise then we don't care. And they just continue doing what they do anyway. And for me, one of the things that really bothered me about this meeting, and it was a personal thing too, because again, they're polluting right over my parents' home. They have sent my dad on wild goose chases. They have ignored him.
Yep.
So, but being there early, I noticed there was like a stage where they present and then we're like in an audience setting type of thing. And on the stage, we had the state regulator, and I'm gonna say his name, Brad Patterson. It was him and it was Cheniere people. And then it was TCEQ people. So it gave the appearance of a team, a team.
Yep.
The regulating agency that's there to police them and essentially protect us and our environment. They had this little briefing before the meeting. And in this briefing, the regulating agency rep, Brad Patterson, he said, okay, so when they ask questions or whatever, y'all let me handle it. Anything that gets out of hand, I will squash that. Y'all don't react. Y'all don't react. I will squash that. He said, and he said, another thing we can do if things get out of hand is take a break. That's always good. And then he said, are there plenty of, and this is the part that bothered me really, really, really bad. Are there plenty of uniforms here? Because that always helps. And then somebody answered yes, and I don't know who it was, but it's important to see here that we are in a building that's a public building.
Right.
These are
Community center.
peace officers that are there in the community by their tax dollars and there to protect them. And yet they're being used as pawns by Cheniere. So who are they there for? Are they there for the city of Portland? Are they there for Cheniere? Are they there for Brad Patterson? Or are they there for the people?
Yeah.
It was troublesome because we're peaceful people. I mean, mostly that comment period was young people and elderly people. I don't know what they're so afraid of, you know.
Mhm.
But
They're
anyway,
afraid of us influencing others and getting this information because it was a permit where they wanted to increase pollution because they're already exceeding their regulated amount. So they wanted to be able to emit more NOx, more
What's a
SOx,
NOx?
more
What's a NOx?
monoxide,
Could you,
nitrous oxide.
okay.
Yeah. And then
benzene,
sodium,
formaldehyde.
sulfur dioxide. Yeah. Yeah. You know, carbon monoxide, benzene, there's volatile organic compounds,
And why are
there's
those
methane,
things bad?
there's just
I guess, why are those things bad? And
those are like cancer causing, those are like long-term kind of pollutants that cannot be really taken out of the system, and out of the ozone. And you know, if we inhale those, and we already live in an area where people are, you know, they have a lot of like diabetes. There's a lot of diabetes in the area. There's already a lot of like, you know, cardiovascular disease and respiratory issues. You know, and so that in our population, when we breathe that in, you know, it's only harming us more, especially when we live in an area where we also don't have enough people who have health insurance or are afraid to go to the doctor or can't afford to go to the doctor because they can't afford to take time off of work.
And the kiddos, they're probably not going to see the effects of that till later on.
Yeah. Yeah. So since they were already exceeding these levels, Sorry, I had to change my hand, like, 'cause my hand was falling asleep, my arm was falling asleep. You know, yeah.
It's so basic.
Oh, you can, we're gonna, Chloe's gonna take over.
Just swap.
You know, since they were already exceeding these, their regulated levels, then TCEQ, which you would think like works for the community, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, it's there to protect. Their mission statement says they're there to help the environment, protect communities, all that kind of stuff. They kind of pull these industries in and they say, hey, to avoid fines, because you're paying fines every day, which is actually cheaper for them. Like a lot of times, like rather than putting in new technology, it's cheaper for them to pay the fine. But they're like, you know, so we can save you a little bit more money. Let's bring you in and let's increase your air permit. And that way you don't pay fines and you can still
Okay, so
exceed more pollutants.
I'm gonna just kind of recap right here to make sure that I'm processing what you just said.
That's good.
So Cheniere was violating, Cheniere had permits, pollution permits that said we will not emit more than this of these toxic chemicals.
Right.
And so EPA in the past, or TCEQ in the past said that this is the limit.
And real quick, we're talking like 240 violations out of 365 years. So
I mean, days,
the-
like, so
yes,
240
days, yes.
So they had like 240 violations over 365 days.
Yeah, so every
they're
day.
almost every day, right? Except Sunday.
Yes, yes.
So their limits were going over that, like that. And then what they were doing was just paying a fine, because whatever, right? And then rather than TCEQ say, hey, you are not being responsible to the community or to the environment, we have to shut you down because you're not being a good neighbor. And let's rewrite the rules so you can save money and you can pollute more.
And that's the third time.
Was
Yeah.
That was the third meeting that they've had, the exact
the
same
third
one.
one?
Yes.
Third time that they've requested to increase their permit.
And the
Okay.
TCQ is basically telling the Cheniere, if the villagers get too out of hand, we'll squash them.
Yeah.
Literally.
And I think that's
I'll
why they
squash
have
anything that gets
the,
out of hand.
What
yeah, exactly. I think that's why they have the police presence there, is because they know, whether they admit it or not, that what they do is actually violent. Like it is a form of violence. And so they expect people to, you know, after a while, people want to defend themselves. And I really think, yeah, like that is an admission of their guilt to have that police presence there.
I noticed too that, like, for intimidation purposes, I guess, I don't know, it was very interesting to be there early because I'm late everywhere I ever go. And so I don't ever like see anything
Same.
beforehand. But that, yeah, I was early and it was very eye-opening, I guess, too, offensive to see too, that some of the people I saw up there in the little briefing were like industry guys or something. I guess we could call them that. I don't know, because they don't introduce themselves. We have to go in and say our name, our address, our phone number, our email, our what we ate for dinner last night before we can
your fingerprint
for 3 minutes.
Redness skin.
Yeah, really, before we can speak for 3 minutes. But these guys, they don't introduce themselves. They're just people, just guys, and they look different. Yeah, and then I noticed when their little meeting dispersed, they like strategically positioned themselves in like corners of the room and were just like, they're like lurking, like evil. It's like, we don't want to see you as evil, but don't act so evil. Like, don't act like
Yeah.
You shouldn't be laughing. It's so awful that I'm laughing.
it is, but it's true. Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
we're on to y'all.
Here's my next question. So like if you hear this, I'm hearing this and I'm like, man, feels demoralizing. And I know that there are people like, who cares? You know, they're gonna do what they want to do anyway. Just go ahead and live your life. So why is that not the response that we should have? You know,
For me, it's not a choice. I mean, if for me to stay here and to live close to my parents, which is kind of in a way, just depending on who you are, like that might not be a choice either. But for me to stay here, and I can't ignore it. How do you ignore that? How do you ignore that you see this? I guess, I don't know. I just think, and maybe that's a selfish reason, but For me, that's how I feel, like it just can't be ignored. There's no future here for our kids if we ignore this.
Okay. What about you guys? What's y'all's sense of like why people shouldn't check out?
Mhm.
I mean, for me, it's like we got to think about this stuff wasn't in our community the entire time.
Mhm.
Whereas our families, for many of us, have been here for a long time.
Mhm.
And, you know, we've seen it with other industries where they'll file bankruptcy and they'll leave. We saw it happen with Alcoa, which was what Sherwin, you know, Sherwin Illumina. Yeah, like, you know, what happened? What did they do? Filed bankruptcy. They said, we're not going to pay the people. We're going to leave. And now that land, which is, you know, kind of coincidentally, that land that they left behind has been purchased by Cheniere, and that's where they want to build this expansion. So we, you know, if we love where we live, these are our roots. It should be very difficult for these industries to pull us out of our roots, because this is for us. This is for our children. This water is, you know, been in our like ancestry for generations. Like, you know, we have a right to this area. We have a right to our homes. And, you know, it's important that we fight and we continue to fight, because the laws, the way they were written to make it so easy for one industry, we can also fight to make them more stringent. But the fact is that they take advantage of people not being aware of what's going on. So we got to start demanding that we get treated better and stop buying the lie that they help us, because they take more from us than anything we'll ever get in return. We're, you know, to have those industries in our communities, we're paying for them to be there. Like Cheniere does not employ the amount of people they say they're going to employ, and yet they've taken billions of dollars in tax subsidies and benefits and things like that. So imagine if we invested that in the people. Imagine if we invested that into taking care of our ecosystem, which many families, like not just the ones who live there, but the ones who go and visit and, like, you know, vacation there in Corpus, because they're like, oh, I don't want to drive all the way to South Padre, or oh, we have, like, you know, memories of going to Corpus and spending time there. And some people may want to recreate the washing machine, you know, there, like, you know, in the area. Like, you know, it's just like we have a lot of like people who come. So it's like we can change things, and we should demand better and stop falling for this. I mean, because we're already paying for it. We're already investing so much of our money in for it, like into these industries. So like we got to tell our political leaders to say, you know, stop investing in that and invest in the people, because at the end of the day, it's our money. It's not theirs.
Just to add to what you said, Elida, earlier, how you said that, you know, you met people from Argentina, you've met people from Mexico, you met people from really all over the world who you literally said I don't know if you said it to us before, but it's happening all over the world. And there's also, for us, for our family, there's this idea that if we ran away, where are we going to go and get away from it? If you don't stand up and fight, you're going to run away to somewhere else where it's occurring anyway. Because unfortunately it is occurring all over the world. It's the governments that are running the world that are doing this. And one other thing I wanted to add to what you said, how, you know, the idea that we need them and the idea that we're nothing without them. Like you mentioned, oh, my mind's going blank, but like you mentioned earlier that, you know, we kind of pay their way to be here. And I know one of the things that I noticed in that Cheniere meeting was the port. And I believe it was Cheniere's presentation started with all the uses for natural gas. And we're aware of that. Like you said, we still heavily depend on that resource. But the idea that they're selling is we provide this for you, and they don't. They're providing it for foreign countries who don't necessarily want it either. You know?
Yeah. And you know, we also got to remember, like, the impacts of fracking. I mean, we're being told right now, you can't turn on your faucets if you're going to do this. Don't take a shower for more than this. You can't water your gardens, even if you're growing your own food, you know, which in some neighborhoods is toxic. That soil is toxic now because of all the pollutants in the air. You know, but we can't use our own water. And why is the state, not just because of the weather conditions and the lack of rain, but industries take millions of gallons of water per day. And just in our communities, we're seeing it with, all of these facilities with ExxonMobil SABIC or Gulf Coast Growth Ventures and their 20 million gallons of water a day. Where's that water's coming from somewhere?
Yeah.
It's not like they're capturing their own water. That water, like we said, it's not like they take, first they give to the community and whatever's left over, they give it to these facilities. They don't. We're in competition,
So,
Yeah.
and
And so like we see it and we only see the impacts because where this LNG export facility is. But when you go to like places in the Permian Basin, like going all the way to San Antonio, like where Kennedy is at, like Karn City, all of the smaller towns around there, or like Eagleford Shell, or places like in Lubbock and all that, like, we hear more devastation in those communities because people are suffering, like, their air is really, really bad. And, there was a politician from that area who, rather than being concerned for his community, he was like proud of the fact that you don't even have to light a night at light, like at night, light a night, light a light, turn on the light at night. You could just step outside and read a book by all of the flares in the
We
area.
have a lot of that mentality here, but we cut off Chloe. Chloe,
I
why
would
do
say,
you?
Chloe, yeah, why do you think it's like just checking out isn't an option? Like,
Yeah, I'm trying to think of it more from like a non-organizer perspective. Like what, so like my mind kind of goes to like a big issue that people are really concerned about is like bullying with children. You send your child to this place where you're hoping that they're on this journey of self-discovery, they're getting an education, they're finding friends, and then you hear this really devastating fact that someone is terrorizing them, right? What what do parents tell children? Stand up for yourself, right? Tell someone, get with other people and make sure that this bully cannot bully anymore, right? And so like we would never tell our children, accept it, it's just the way it is, you're too small, you don't matter enough. So why do we tell ourselves that when we have these big bullying industries that are terrorizing us in our communities? Why do we tell ourselves that we deserve it? And so and that's the way that I try to like tell people is like they're never going to go away, and that like our suffering is not like what amount of suffering are they going to accept? Like, are they going to draw the line out and say, oh yeah, it's too much? It's not. It's whatever their bottom line is, whatever amount of profit that they're going to make,
And they want it
that
all.
is actually what matters to them.
right.
So yeah, why would we not accept it for other people, but we'd accept it for ourselves?
Yeah. And I mean, and being here,
I love that, Chloe, because you give me goosebumps. You can understand how much of that has motivated me, because I've seen my dad. He's 70 years old and he's a pain. He's a pill.
I
But
love
to
him.
see him, a person who has the knowledge that industry has, because you do see the imbalance as far as like the actual technical knowledge between the people who are supposed to be regulating this and the industry. They control the knowledge too, like the actual processes, like how you turn gas into a liquid and how you, that's his bread and butter. And I've seen him, and what I used to feel, like maybe it's because of the way we are, maybe it's because of the way we look, maybe it's because of, but I've heard, people out in Ingleside on the Bay get ridiculed and bullied online and said, oh, poor little rich white woman, and I'm like, oh, they treat us like that too, and we're neither rich nor white. Okay, so they are just big fat bullies. And it's been really hard to see these people, Jeff Pollock, sit up there and laugh at my dad, laugh at him. I mean, literally just laugh at a man who's telling him, who's been doing engineering processes longer than he's been alive. Laugh at him. Omar Garcia rolling his eyes and laughing at us. And just that, you're gonna put up with that for so long, and then you're gonna get off your knees and you're gonna stand up. And you're gonna say, you know what? Not only are you laughing at me, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know,
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up. And as far as like young people, I'm so proud of you, because I know like this has taken a toll on my sleeping habits, on my family, on everything. But when I leave the house, my kids will be like, bye mom, hope you don't get kicked out. And I'm like, these dudes, and I want them to grow up, because I don't know what kind of world they're gonna grow up in. Right now, it's looking like they might be walking to the end of the streets with buckets to fill up water from the water truck that Exxon rationed out for them. So I want them to grow up with that backbone. And I love what you said, Chloe. I love it.
Yeah, me too. So I'm like, we've been chatting for maybe like around 30 minutes or so, and we had talked about not doing it too long because I know you guys have stuff going on over there, but I think that that's a really great space for us to end on, because we talked about the multiple reasons why it's important for us to continue to be active and to face it, right? Because we wouldn't tolerate it for our kids. And I think that's really powerful, and all of the reasons, but like when you center that, that's the other thing, just really quick, and then we'll wrap it up. But like family orientation, like familism, the like thinking of, and if we extend that metaphor that everybody is part of our family, we're all worth fighting for. You know?
Yeah.
So,
And that's a real incentive, like in Serio. Like we are fucking amazing people. Our communities are like, you know, we demand better, we deserve better. You know, like, let's not put up with this. You know, because we're hearing from people like that we consider third world countries, and like they're like, yeah, no. Like, you know, we want to save our rivers, we want to save our homes, this is our ancestral land. Like, you know, and if they're not gonna give it to us, then we demand it and we take it. You know, just the way they're like wanting us to take their abuse. Yeah, no. Like, no mas.
That's right.
You know, so
can I take like 2, 3? I just want to end up on one thing that actually ties into this. There were some very, and we kind of paused the water for now, but there's been a lot going on this week with the water and with the budget input meetings, and just with us kind of pushing back on that narrative that we have to count every drop. So we've kind of started counting all the drops. And I wanted to just kind of leave y'all with a little bit of what's to come. But I did kind of want to take a minute just to clear the air, because there were some really brave souls that went to the budget input meetings and spoke up for Hillcrest and spoke up about our water. And there was a big, huge lie peddled by City Manager Peter Zanoni. And he basically, you know, called us liars and discredited us. And I'm not going to stand for that. So I was going to see if you guys would just take a few minutes to listen. I just want to put this out there. Like I said, there's more to come, but it's really been bothering me and I'm beginning to see this game of numbers that I think we need to put a stop to before it gets out of hand. So the question came up during one of the budget input meetings as to why we're being curtailed when industry is using 80% of our water, and we only use 20%. And so we're being told to cut that in half. So Mr. Zanoni replied, and I'll read to you his reply that he wrote. And again, I have all of this written down and everything, but to me, this was urgent. I'm sorry. I didn't want to take up a whole lot of time, but Mr. Zanoni replied to one of our residents who was really brave and outspoken. He replied, I'm glad you bring up that 80%. I'm glad you bring up that 80% up, because we do need to correct it for the record. I see it on your social media as well. It's not 80%. 80% does not go to industry. It's less than 50%. We're getting those numbers refined. I don't know why you refine numbers. Numbers are absolute. They're not. We're getting those numbers refined because in that 50%, that's a big delivery to San Pat Water District, who has to help us break down how much they give residential commercials. So please, it's not 80%. We'd be in big trouble if that were the case, because 20% for the community to have to manage. So it's less than 50% that goes to large volume users in our community. And I made a point there to say, on this day, industry uses less than 50%, okay? But then on August 31st, Councilman Barrera and Esteban Ramos said that industry is taking approximately 80% of the water. So on that day, according to the city, they take 80%. On July 21st, 2022, that day, they take 70 to 80%. And I won't go into the details of where. I have done every time the city has come out with a different number. July 19th, on that day, Mike Murphy told Barrera that industry takes 55% of the water. And then the figure they have in 2000, the figure they have from 2019 is 49% of the water. So Mr. Zanoni, it's 80-20, and we don't really want your numbers. We don't need them. We have we have people who can calculate the number of water, the number of gallons that you all are saying is necessary for sanitation and human use. And we're going to get into that too, because you apparently are coming after that too, City of Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
So,
and you know, but sorry.
I just wanted to clear the air on that, because I feel like he really just flat out lied.
He did. We're gonna call him Zaphony from now on, okay?
The phony. Yeah.
The phony.
Yeah.
So phony
I love
numbers.
that.
That's it.
So we have to talk about the water, and
In
we have
serio.
to talk in serio about the water.
Yeah.
This playing of the numbers that we're seeing, this
And
manipulation. We're not going to stand for that anymore.
yeah, and you know, like this whole experience has opened up our eyes like a lot. You know, when we first landed here, you know, we didn't have all the refineries around us. And then, you know, when we turned on the tap water, it was like, can we drink this? Or, you know, is it a problem? And like, you know, they're like, no, like people just fill up their glasses from the tap. And, you know, it's like, we used to have that before all of these industries started moving in.
Yeah.
So like, that was something that we already had. And so it's, you know, they can't say, well, you know, we cannot provide that for you.
We're going backwards.
We cannot do this for you.
Right.
I guess what you're saying is we're going backwards.
We're going down.
Backwards.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we're gonna let you guys go because we know that you've got work to do over there and stuff. And we're excited for you, and we look forward to hearing more about what has happened and what's going on. Thanks for sharing
That's
that
so
image with
neat.
us.
That's so neat. You guys take care and hurry back. Okay,
Yeah.
don't have to hurry back. Sorry, that's my mom guilt.
Yeah. All right.
Back
Miss
here.
y'all so
We
much.
miss y'all.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
It looks cool over there.
That was so good.